Is that us now?
Good to go.
Yep, okay. Can we call for the Suderian and the apologies, please, Stuart?
Okay, thank you, Chair. In terms of Suderians, Councillor Jones.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Watts.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson. Thank you. Councillor Canning.
Present, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Mabin.
Yeah, present.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Here.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Cogley.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lennox.
Morning, present.
Thank you. Councillor Kyle.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Hogg.
Yes, present, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, present, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So all 11 members are present either in person or remotely, so no apologies. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And we'd like to welcome Sanya Ahmed from Audit Scotland, who we know are our external auditors for the next 5 years. So welcome to Sanya. Okay. So any declarations of interest? And Julie will take this.
Yes, thanks and good morning, members. So it's just to invite any declarations of interest from members in terms of any of the items on this morning's agenda.
Okay, so I'll kick that off. Julie, I'm on the board of the Galleon. Okay. Councillor Stewart?
Yeah, I need to declare an interest in East Ayrshire Performs on the warm spaces and the cost of living support. I work for one of the companies that get money for both.
Thanks for that, Chair. In terms of yourself being a board member of the Galleon, in terms of the new guidance, we don't require that to be declared now. So, but thank you for that.
Okay, thanks, Julie. Thank you. Okay, so we'll head to the previous minute. I beg your pardon, Councillor Hogg.
And that's okay. Just in terms of the cost of living, etc., I'm a chair of a charity that also receives monies from the cost of living. So just to declare that as well.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the previous minutes, can we approve the minute is correct? Yep. Thank you very much, Councillor Richardson. And Councillor Canning second that. Thank you.
Chair.
Yep. So that was for the 26th of January. And the minute from the call-in meeting on the 2nd of March. Can we approve those minutes as well, please? Thank you very much, Councillor Richardson. And Councillor Canning again, thank you very much. Okay. So we'll head on to item 3, and that's auditing best value, and that's from Ian Tuff, Head of Corporate Support. Thank you, Ian. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. The Accounts Commission published its new Code of Audit Practice in June 2021, and the Council's new external auditors, Audit Scotland, now in place. And as they will be using the new code as a basis of their audit work, we've taken the opportunity in this report to provide an update on the new approach to auditing best value, a note of those councils that will be subject to Controller of Audit reports in the first year of the new arrangements, and a summary of the areas that will be the focus of best value audit work in the Council by Audit Scotland in 2023. Chair, the new Code of Audit Practice describes a high-level principles-based purpose and scope of public audit in Scotland. It replaces the code issued in June 2016 and comes into effect for audits of financial years starting on or after 1 April 2022. The Accounts Commission's approach to best value auditing requires auditors to assess and report on the Council's performance in meeting our best value and community planning duties. Auditors use a risk-based approach and integrate that assessment with the annual audit and the wider scope themes of financial management, financial sustainability, vision, leadership and governance, and the use of resources to improve outcomes. These are described in detail at paragraph 7. In addition, at paragraph 10, we reference the Scottish Government's statutory guidance on best value that requires councils to demonstrate that they are delivering best value in respect of 7 themes, namely vision and leadership, governance and accountability, effective use of resources, partnerships and collaborative working with communities, sustainability and fairness and equality. In terms of public reporting under the new arrangements, the Accounts Commission has agreed that the councils listed at paragraph 12 be included in the first year of Controller of Audit reports. Audit Scotland will also be reporting annually to the Commission on specific themes. This is intended to facilitate the exchange of ideas and performance data, as well as offering a detailed analysis of a specific aspect of the work of all councils. The first theme will be leadership of the development of new local strategic priorities, including examining how effectively council priorities reflect the need to reduce inequalities and address climate change. At a local level, Audit Scotland have also indicated that they will be undertaking a number of pieces of work as part of their 2022-23 audit of the council in relation to best value, including a review of performance management, including statutory performance indicators and local government benchmarking framework data. Lastly, from paragraph 16, we remind members of the positive outcomes and recommendations from the last best value audit of the council that was reported in 2018. Chair, recommendations are presented for members' consideration at paragraph 2, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks again, Chair.
Thanks very much, Ian. Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments for Ian?
Ask a question.
Of course, can.
Page 17, point 12. Is that different? We've not reached that yet.
That's the East Ayrshire Performance
Right, okay.
paper, David.
Okay, we'll wait till we get to that then.
That's perfectly fine. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions or comments for Ian at this time? So I'll just go back to, paragraph 16 and onwards, just the positive report from the council from the previous report from 2018. And that's good to know. So we'll be building on those, and so we have a good track record, and and we'll definitely keep that up.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so the report, the Best Value Assured report from 2018 was a very positive report for the council, and actually our external auditors at the time, Deloitte, commented on that at GNS previously as well, and I think members perhaps had the benefit of that. The new committee rather had the benefit of hearing that from Deloitte previously as well. Thanks, Chair.
We did, I'm sure we'll all remember that. There was very positive feedback from Deloitte for all of the council, so that was really good and reassuring. Okay, so does anybody want to come in with any other comments? Anybody online? Anybody online?
No.
No? Okay, so Ian, thank you very much for that report. Thank you. So folks, we agree the recommendations. Page 10, paragraph 2. Yep. Okay, thank you. Okay. So we'll now head on to item 4, East Ayrshire Performs, and we'll bring in Joe Laughlin under revenue. Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. This is the third East Ayrshire Performs report of this year, and it was presented to Cabinet on the 15th of February for consideration and approval. Cabinet spent some time on the new section in the report that updates on the use of the £3.1 million to support cost of living. And Cabinet noted the position and agreed to request that this committee, as part of their scrutiny responsibility, have a particular focus on the funding allocated and the numbers attending the warm welcome places within communities as outlined in the report, and the additional information that's provided on the pack today, and to remit the Deputy Chief Executive to report back to Cabinet on the findings at the earliest opportunity. Cabinet further agreed to reallocate £100,000 of the balance as outlined under section 9 of the report, but that there be no spend on the remaining balance until the review today has taken place, other than in exceptional circumstances, as approved by the Head of Housing and Communities in conjunction with the Deputy Chief Executive. Members, with that in mind, I propose to go through the East Ayrshire Performs report and pass across to colleagues at the end, so that they can take members through the cost of living section and the additional papers in your pack today, and so that scrutiny requested by Cabinet can be undertaken. So we begin, members, on paragraph 7 on page 17. It notes that the general fund uncommitted balance was, at the time of reporting to Cabinet, £7.9 million or 2.1%. However, members will also be aware that the meeting to set the 2023-24 revenue budget took place between the East Ayrshire Reforms Cabinet meeting and the meeting today. And at that budget setting Cabinet, it was explained that due to the approval of the review of balances report, and as a result of options progressed by members as part of the budget setting process, the general fund uncommitted balance is now £9 million or 2.5%, not the 2.1% in the report today. Paragraph 10 relates to the education budget and notes an overspend anticipated of around £2.4 million, mainly due to increased demand within additional support for learning, as well as an anticipated overspend of £1 million in the early years 1140 funded element of the grant. I just want to reassure members that the Chief Education Officer has continued to work through the wider review of ASN. We saw that at Cabinet yesterday, and that both she and I are working to speak with relevant colleagues to bring that overspend in early years back under control. The report also notes that the services within community and economy will end the year around £1.2 million over budget. And as members are aware from previous East Ayrshire Reforms reports, this is mainly due to overspends within the waste disposal cost contract. And members are aware that that contract was recently let in the last year, and that the Head of Housing and Communities is taking steps on a number of fronts to bring those costs back under control, both from an expenditure control method and also from contract management as well. Within Ayrshire Roads Alliance, the service is continuing to manage within the budget, albeit it's important to note that that slight overspend of £100,000 is masking a £700,000 additional cost in respect of primary and secondary school transport. It was a matter that was discussed yesterday at Cabinet. Cabinet considered the report in detail. It was a report that was continued for a period of time, with the Head of Roads asked to go and speak with relevant colleagues to design the consultation and engagement process that will take place, and that a report will be brought back to Cabinet that will launch that consultation and engagement on the solutions and the remedies that can be deployed in order to bring that budget back under control. Paragraph 13 details the anticipated end-of-year position in respect of our health and social care partnership. It shows that while this is a service that's looking to end the year around £2 million under budget, it's masking a whole range of pressures that the service is having to deal with. It is still a service where COVID and the requirements and constraints of COVID are alive and well. It means that they've spent £3.6 million of their budget this year supporting independent and private sector residential care homes. They've deployed staff into those settings. They continue to purchase PPE, as well as placing additional staff throughout the sector, and seeing really additional costs taking place within out-with placements too. It's a budget that required them to call down some money that they got from government at the beginning or the end of last financial year in order to absorb those costs. So we're seeing, members, as we conclude the revenue part, that some services are seeing some quite significant budget variances. You know how it works here in terms of our reserve strategy, that where a service underspends at the year end, then it carries forward that underspend into next year as a gain against next year's budget. But where they overspend, then that overspend becomes the first hit against next year's budget. So you can see in terms of housing and communities and in terms of education, a whole number of colleagues working across sector to try and bring those budgets back under control, because we know the consequences of not doing so or not closing those gaps in them that we'll have on the budgets that commence on the 1st of April. Going back to the Cabinet report that approved this East Ayrshire Performance Report, that Cabinet gave approval for the actions through paragraph 15 to 23 that sees £10,000 previously approved for Cabinet Trust to coincide originally with the opening of the Barony campus, delayed due to the pandemic, now being allowed to support music in our schools. And paragraph 16 to 23 deal with specific asks of Cabinet on capital, and Simon will take us through that as we get to the capital section of the report. Members, the sections from paragraph through to 27 to 34 will be dealt with separately in the accompanying report. However, it's important, I think, that I draw your attention to paragraphs 30 to 33, which highlight really the successful community defibrillator initiative, where 22 community groups and clubs across East Ayrshire have benefited from this scheme. The Here to Listen suicide prevention strategy that David speaks about quite rightly in this committee and elsewhere, and the real tangible benefits that strategy brings, and the courses that we provide as well through David in terms of mental health first aid. Chair, I'm happy to stop there and conclude the discussion on the revenue section and take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Okay, Councillor Richardson.
Chair, apologies to yourself and the meeting for jumping the gun earlier on. So it's a question about page 17.12. So as Joe has just confirmed, as we know, things have changed since these papers were printed. So thanks for clarifying that, Joe. In the immortal words of the Corries, yesterday I believe officers were sent away to think again. However, I've got two questions. They're no motions, they're just questions about the cutbacks to potential cutbacks to subsidised school travel, which in my mind is an absolutely vital public service. So first question, what assurances can officers give this committee that the events surrounding the full public consultation on the Howard Park, which led to a 5-hour Governance and Scrutiny Committee meeting, which we'll never forget, will not be repeated? Can this committee receive written assurances that all families, and I believe that's around 600 families, affected by the potential withdrawal of their children's bus service will receive a letter signposting them to the online consultation if one proceeds? And also, in that letter pack, can they receive a form in which their views can be written and returned to East Ayrshire Council in a reply paid provided envelope if they prefer? I just want some assurances that we're going to contact absolutely every family that could be affected by this potential cutback. Question 2. Sorry, is it okay just to go into the second one? Brilliant. As a new councillor and being the equivalent of, let's say, a backbencher in parliamentary terms, these cost-cutting measures, if they ever get to elected members for a vote, what are the mechanisms within East Ayrshire Council to ensure that all 32 members of the council receive a vote in this matter? So that's the second question. Thanks, Chair.
No, that's fine, David. I think in terms of decision making, then that's the function of Cabinet. But I could bring in officers, Joe and Julie, just to, give guidance, explain to Councillor Richardson.
So through you, Chair. So in terms of assurance that the scrutiny won't last the same time as the previous calling, I think it's one where we just need to be careful in terms of our ask, because I think it's right and proper on occasions that members deploy that scrutiny and challenge function, not just in a political setting, but certainly for officers too. So I'm not sure I can give an assurance that if it was to come back, and it will come back at some point, for the consultation to launch, but at some point during that process, whether it's the launch of the consultation or it's the outcome of the consultation, the recommendation from officers, that in itself will not cause a meeting to become prolonged. In terms of the issue itself, it's something we've been grappling with for a great time. We have sought in the past to deploy additional financial resources to the budget to try and bring it under control. However, it's a budget that we see rising costs and we see reducing numbers. And, you know, against that background and not going into yesterday's paper to any large extent, but East Ayrshire Council, as members are aware, does provide more than the statutory minimum in terms of school transport. And I think that is still being maintained, that additional obligation will be continued. This is about the subsidised. So in that part, I think that, you know, we'll discuss more, and officers will be discussing that as we speak. In terms of the consultation itself, I'll take those points back to the head of roads. Certainly there'll be a large scale comms deployed in terms of this matter. I think what's officers have been asked to do yesterday is go away and design that consultation. What is the ask? What is the ask? Because if the ask is simply, do you want it to end? Then we know the answer. The answer is likely to be no. But the answer has to be constructed in a way that it shows the consequential impact of maintaining what we have, which is that some years ago we deployed probably just under £500,000 of additional resource that hasn't really worked. And it's now £683,000 overspent, £420,000 of that being attributed to the subsidised spaces. And so it's where we go for that recurring element. So I think that would be something that we're away working on, and the recommendation at Cabinet, yes, it was quite important. It was that Kevin engages with relevant colleagues to design the consultation. And I think that's really important. So I would give an assurance in that. And in terms of the comms itself, it will be deployed. In terms of individual letters, yes, but nervous at the old cost of prepaid envelopes, but we can see what we can do with that. Let me go away and speak to colleagues about that and see how that would work. But certainly I'll take that back. And in terms of the second point about all receiving a vote, and I'm conscious I don't want to step in Julie's toes, but in terms of the scheme of delegation, it is Cabinet that is the body that would make those recommendations. You know how it works here in terms of our engagement with members. We don't tend to bring reports like that just to Cabinet. It would go through a political group process before that, where all elected members would be engaged and taken through it. And I think we've done that in the past. It's worked successfully. And I think we would do that as part of this process as well. So hopefully, and what I've said, there's a level of assurance there, certainly in terms of the first part, and in terms of the importance that the senior management team have on this subject, and very aware of Cabinet's view yesterday.
Billy, do you want to come in?
No, just basically to back up what Joe was saying there as well. In terms of the scheme of delegation, obviously council are there to set the council's revenue and capital budgets, but thereafter the decision makings on these type of matters goes through Cabinet.
So I think Councillor Ingram is a transport spokesperson. So I would advise you to speak with Councillor Ingram and then have a meeting with Kevin Braidwood, Head of Ayrshire Roads Alliance, David, to put your points across, if that's helpful.
Oh, absolutely, Chair. I mean, obviously, my particular ward is heavily impacted by this. So, thanks for the answers to those questions.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Councillor Cogley, good morning.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. I've got a few questions, but wish to focus on paragraph 12 for the purposes of this question. And thank you, David, for raising it. And I think it's important that we focus on the issue, not on the process. And I think it's all very well, Jay, saying that if we do take away part of this service, we won't be doing less than providing the statutory minimum. I personally don't think that's good enough. I think if we're taking away something that we currently provide, That's the issue that we as councillors face, and it's the issue that our constituents are looking to us to continue. And I feel very, very uncomfortable about any consideration of removing a service that we currently provide. Now, how we go about consulting on that, I see as a sort of slightly different point. And if there's a call in, how we deal with that is again a different point. But as a matter of principle, as an elected member, I would be vehemently opposed to removing a service that we currently provide. So that's me on paragraph 12. Thank you.
Okay, Sally, do you have any other questions?
Yes, I do. Yeah. Paragraph 10, the education overspend on the 1140 hours. I thought, and I have a question on paragraph 11 as well, but paragraph 10 first, please. I thought that the cost of this was covered by the Scottish Government. I didn't think that it had to come from our additional reserves. Joe, perhaps you could enlighten us, please.
So you, Chair, so you're absolutely right, Councillor Cogley. So 1140, we received 2 tranches of funding. Every council received 2 tranches of funding, a significant amount for revenue and a significant amount for capital. So you're hearing in the report that Simon presents about the new early learning and childcare centres funded from the capital element, and the almost operational side, the bit that pays for the practitioners and the upkeep and the like, and the provision itself is through the revenue side. We receive a substantial grant for that. I think it's around 13 to 15 million pounds. It is that grant. We've spent more than the grant, which is a concern for me and for Linda. We're taking that forward. I met Linda at 8:30 this morning. Again, on this subject, there's been 4 meetings so far, given the concern that both Linda and I have on this. So we're seeing an overspend, and you'll hear about this as we go through the report, on staffing, and overspend in the provision of early years meals, and we're seeing an overspend in the costs and contributions we provide to partner providers. So there's 3 elements of the budget that are currently overspending, and I would just ask members to take the assurance I'm giving that, you know, we are actively on this. It is not going to be easy to try and bring this back under control, but we are very, very clear in this council that members are resolute in their determination that this is a Scottish Government funded initiative, and that there is a reluctance from members that to use or utilise any element of East Ayrshire's funding to support the 1140 provision. And so members, please be aware that we have that in our minds at all times as we take that forward. But Councillor Cogley, please be assured that we are, and I am driving this one too, because the outcome of this is that if this is not brought under control, then a budget that's already with a £1 million overspend will go into next year with £1 million out of its budget to try and find a solution for that as well. So we're trying to deploy that remedy, and I don't think we'll get all of the £1 million brought back, but we're trying to deploy that before we get to the year-end position.
Joe, thanks very much for that. I've got a question about waste management, but I can see Elaine wants to come in. So if it's on education, I'd rather let Elaine carry on. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Stewart.
No, it's not about education, because I'd actually spoke. I knew that's what Joe was going to be doing anyway, Sally. No, so just you go and I'll come in after you.
Okay, thanks very much. So paragraph 11 on waste management, I can see an overspend there. Now, obviously there's a lot of discussion at the moment about the DRS, the deposit return scheme. Is this going to impact on us going forward? And if so, in what way? Thank you.
So through you, Chair. But £1.3 million of an overspend at the moment in waste. It doesn't include the deposit return scheme, and I'll come on to that in a moment. We've seen a change from the previous provider of our contractor for this contract to a new provider that has seen substantial costs, and members know the history of this contract, the previous contract, and the implications and issues that arose for that company. So Head of Housing and Communities, as you would expect, utilising expertise from across the council to try and support him and his team through this contract. It was always known that the contract itself would have an additional higher cost, a substantial higher cost, once it was awarded. You know that Cabinet had approved a £1 million of a one-off balance to try and help with those costs, and that you met as council on the 23rd, and within that budget you have provided an additional £1 million of recurring budget to the waste contract starting in April, in a few weeks' time, recognising the pressures that are within that budget. But in doing so, you know that it's not just a limitless pot. You've challenged officers quite rightly, and so the Head of Housing and Communities, supported by other officers, are looking at other contract arrangements, issues around Garlaff, issues around Western Road, to try and bring around measures that would support the contract. Maybe not this contract, but this is a short-term 2-year contract. But other options as we go forward, as we lay out maybe a contract for maybe 5 years, in a couple of years' time, if that's the duration that the Head of Housing and Communities wants. At the same time, the council will begin to own some other assets that would mean that as we go into that contract process, we're holding some benefits that we can actually use to manage those contracts in a different way. So at the moment, we're seeing a transition from an old contract to a new contract. It's a short-term contract, and as we go forward, that will increase in term. In terms of deposit return scheme, I'm very conscious of what's happening in Scottish Government at the moment, and we're going on the basis that the deposit return scheme at this point in time will go live in a few months' time. We know from the indication provided by the Head of Housing and Communities that as we've sought to try and put additional resource into that waste budget to deal with that contract and hopefully bring that £1.2 million down to zero, it's estimated that deposit return will result in a loss of income, an additional cost to the council somewhere between £400,000 and £500,000 in a year. So watching that very carefully, very conscious that as part of the budget that we have an option there to review the waste calendar, and in doing so a much greater review than what would be what was previously anticipated. I think as part of that, the Head of Housing and Communities will take the opportunity to maybe review wider implications for the service if the deposit return scheme comes in order to try and mitigate that substantial loss of income. So I hope that helps, Councillor Cogley, but it is kind of a moving feast at the moment.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jo. Thank you. That's me.
Okay, thanks, Ali. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Chair. So in paragraph 13, health and social care, and it's great to see that somebody's come in under budget, Jo. I bet you're glad about that. But see at the very end, it's saying that funds can still be drawn down through the COVID funding that was earmarked. Have we still got money sitting in there? And if we don't spend it, will it go back?
So through you, Chair, so kind of complex response, so forgive me. I think it was probably 2 year ends ago, the Scottish Government released around £500 million to councils to say, here's your share of COVID recovery money for the future. So during the pandemic, councils were allowed to submit almost invoices. They were called a different thing, but mobilisation plans. But it was, to all intents and purposes, it was an invoice to the Scottish Government to say, here are our COVID costs as we were living through the total response part of the pandemic. So we received some funding for that. We received £14 million. We used £6 million of that to create 200 apprenticeships. We gave other money away to other things. Last year end, health and social care partnerships were awarded the same benefit. They were lagging in terms of dealing with the pandemic, whereas council services on the whole were coming out of the pandemic a bit faster. Health and social care wasn't. So it took them a year for the government then to say at the last year end, Here is, and I think it was £11 million or so for you to deal with COVID, because we know that the COVID tail will stay longer in health and social care than it will do in traditional other services. So there is a pot of funding there that they have for COVID. They have drawn down I think it's £3.6 million, probably plan to draw down some more. And there's debate taking place around further discussions around COVID. There's discussions taking place around when integration joint boards walk back from the commitments to the private sector care homes. Now, this is a really important one here because during COVID, that was about staffing and PPE. The pressure now is around energy costs within care homes. So there's discussions taking place between IGIBs and government about their ability to walk away from care homes and the energy costs that are within them. Because we know that in households, we've seen dramatic increases in energy costs. That's been even worse in the business sector, and so there's discussions taking place with Craig and colleagues across Scotland to see how they can provide support. So there is plans to return some of that COVID money. You're right, but at this point in time, there's still discussions taking place about, even if that money goes back, and it probably will go back in some form, how does that continued support to the private care home sector take place? Really important for us because we have no council-owned care homes. They're all private sector in East Ayrshire. So that's the discussions that's taking place at the moment, Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Joe.
So, no, very good position then for our care homes in terms of energy costs. I'd just like to highlight from paragraph 30, the continued rollout of the defibrillator, the community defibrillators. I was at one Tuesday in my ward above Adventure, and the company that donated that through the procurement community benefits was Prism. Is that right, David? It was Prism, wasn't it? So it's really, really good to see that's continuing on, and companies are really stepping up and providing these for the communities across East Ayrshire. So fantastic initiative. Well done, David. Of course, Cam.
David, it's just a quick one. Remember we had a kind of offline discussion about the North West Bowling Club and the fact that they might be coming here to a defibrillator that was doubt a case had been broken. Did they ever get that defibrillator up at the North West Bowling Club? Boxing club. Boxing club. And the bowling club's already got one. I'm worried about the boxing club now.
Through you, Chair, it's linked to some work I'm doing, and in fact this week I've got an electrician going in to take a bow at Lindsay Street shops to do some survey work there. So Take a Bow have agreed to give me their defibrillator in return for a new defibrillator that we'll give to them because their box was broken, and that defibrillator they give to us will go to the boxing club. So within the next couple of weeks, Chair.
Brilliant, David. Thank you very much.
Smashing, thank you. So any more comments for this section for Joe? So we'll head on to the People Equity Fund, Joe.
Sorry, Chair, can I just take you to page 24 then, and just the revenue section of the covering report, if that's okay?
Oh, of course, sorry.
So, members, page 24, and it's where we see that drill down information in terms of our services, and we see in education the details around additional staffing within additional support for learning, as well as that additional pressure in terms of ASN transport, and it's where we see that £1 million of the overspend in 1140. Within finance and ICT, we see a projected underspend of £750,000 tied into the vacancies we have as part of our recently approved service redesign, approved by Cabinet on the 18th of January. Worth noting here, members, that my service is currently using £350,000 of our budget to add on to the £1 million we get from Scottish Government for the Scottish Welfare Fund. Two elements to the Scottish Welfare Fund. It provides crisis grants and it provides community care grants. So we in terms of Scottish Welfare Fund, you have a a budget and you're advised by the guidance from government that that budget should be available throughout the year. And so in order to manage that budget, you almost have eligibility tests, and they can be set at low tests, in which case if you're applying and it's a low criteria, you will likely get the payment. It then goes to medium and then goes to high. It's been important this year that I've maintained those levels at low. It means that we've blown through the budget fairly fast, and it's required £350,000 of my budget for staff costs and for ICT that I've put into that, because it's important, members, that I make you aware that this is again signalling that there's real pressure out there in terms of household income, and you'll see this, and you'll see something later on about the council tax reduction that again is giving an indication of just what's happening in communities. And if we can move on to housing and communities, we see that Ayrshire Roads Alliance is likely to end the year about £160,000 over budget, but that's after Kevin has absorbed that £682,000 over pressure for primary and secondary transport. It's also a budget where we're beginning to see an improving picture in terms of parking income, which is really reassuring, albeit we recognise that there's still going to be some pressure on that budget. It's very unlikely to go back to its level of, I think it's about £1.5 million, £1.4 million of income a year. We're getting there. We're getting there probably faster than some other places, but it's reassuring to note that that's taking place. And in housing communities, we see that 1.2 of additional costs relating to waste. I've explained what's happening to that and be reassured that Blair is well on top of that, and within that wellbeing, we're seeing the pressures that are there. It's an underspend, but it's only an underspend because I've drawn down £3.6 million of money in year. Within central services, members, which is on page 26, it's here we're seeing that £500,000 overspend in council tax reduction. Council tax reduction, essentially council tax benefit. So we get £9 million a year from Scottish Government to provide council tax reduction. We're basically a clearinghouse for it. We take the money and we pay it out each week or each month. We're actually spending £500,000 more than we get in terms of that benefit. So again, showing that in terms of household income, they're seeing income levels fall to an extent where the total income in that household is falling to a level where they become eligible for council tax reduction. And on page 27, we see the housing revenue account. And, we know from where the money goes that the housing revenue account is a different account from the general fund. And probably for your own benefit, members, it's probably important to almost compare and align the housing revenue account to the health and wellbeing, because we're seeing some real issues within that housing revenue account. We're seeing legacies from COVID. So that Blair runs two parts to the housing revenue account. The revenue part, where he maintains and staffs up and provides that support, and the capital side, where he provides the improvements. But because of the COVID restrictions, those improvements couldn't be done. You weren't allowed to visit to do it unless it was a dire emergency. So there's work to be done on that. It means that he's spending less on capital. Because he's spending less in capital, he is not receiving capital income. He's not buying as many of the commodities that he would need in terms of kitchens and bathrooms and the like. But he's seeing underspends, but it's not an underspend. Although it's showing an underspend in the year of £1.5 million, we would much rather be in a position where that was break even and all the work was done. So there's a massive catch up taking place within the housing revenue account, and the tail of COVID is lasting a bit longer in there than we would like. So that, I think, members, takes me through the revenue section. Chair, I'm happy just to move on to people equity, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Joe.
And on people equity, it starts at page 30. And members, that this is a strange piece of funding because it's supplied direct from Scottish Government. Scottish Government list the school name and the amount that's to be provided to them from that grant. And so we pass that through to head teachers and to their management teams for them to use in terms of the overall objectives of Pupil Equity Fund. So at this point in time, we've got a total funding envelope for the schools of £5.4 million, of which at the time of the report to Cabinet, £4.1 million had been spent. Pupil Equity Fund doesn't run in financial years, it runs quite rightly in academic years. So we need to capture the position at 31st of March, and we reckon that it'll be around £1.3 million of an underspend at 31st of March. But teachers keeps paying that on salaries, for example, for specific teachers through April, May and June until the academic year ends. So what we can see from the report is that around £500,000 of that £1.3 million is going to be spent staffing costs. That's going to be away by the end of June. But there's likely to be around £700,000 of funding sitting in schools that hasn't been committed by the end of June. Now, head teachers can, with approval of government, which is normally always given, take that forward and take that into the following academic year that will start in August this year. And so that's the position with Pupil Equity Fund. And I'm happy to stop there, Chair, and just take any questions members may have.
Does anybody have any questions for the PEF funding? Just some clarity, so that sometimes when it appears that the schools have a lot of funding, that could be a carryover from the previous year for projects that they have planned. That's right, isn't it?
Chair, that's absolutely right. And you can see in that first column, that's where that happens. And you can see that £1.560 million was brought forward from the previous academic session and then added on to the 2022-23 PEF allocation. And, you know, there are teachers, PEF's becoming really embedded now. There's some head teachers, the management team that are using it for staffing. There's others who are using it for particular numeracy or literacy schemes that maybe cost a bit more money, and in order to get that, you're saving up for about a year or two to do that.
Councillor Richardson.
Joe probably just answered my question, but see each individual school, Joe, when they receive the Pupil Equity Fund money, does the headmaster or headmistress and their management team, do they have complete and utter autonomy? Can they spend this money on absolutely whatever they feel their school needs?
So through you, Chair. So the funding is allocated to the head teacher. It needs to be informed by and driven by the school improvement plan. School improvement plan is set at the start of the academic year. So the head teacher, their management team, the pupil council, the parent council, build up and design the school improvement plan that will set out the funding plans and the pupil equity spending plans for that year. But it is for them in their local setting to determine the best approach to drive down what in old money was called the poverty-related attainment gap, to bring that down and to drive that down over time. And that's, so they do have leeway. What I would do is they have specific independent support from Julie Jameson and the finance team, specific support from procurement, and a specific support from people in culture from HR, because we know that in order for this to be spent, there'll be some occasions where they want to spend in a particular area that procurement needs to be deployed to say, okay, you want that, let's see how we can get that for you. Or if they want to get some staffing, but only for maybe, you know, schools are very good at bringing in like half a post, which is a 0.5 or a 0.2 for 18 months. And so HR's involved to try and design that quickly for them. And we're involved to try and make sure that we can get the financial construct ready, because head teachers now sitting with their council budget that pays for all their staff and their energy and their cleaning, and their pupil equity fund budget that's separate, and the two shall not mix. And so there's specific training and support being given from the finance side to try and manage those two elements, because we recognise that head teachers, you know, will no doubt be numeric, but their first priority is to run their school and to look after their young people.
Any other questions or comments for Joe? Councillor Stewart?
Right, Joe, this might be a bit out there, but obviously at the budget we were looking to 21 teachers going out the door, and things happened and we couldn't do that. Now we've still got the 21 teachers that we thought that we wouldn't need. Are they going to be redeployed into this? I mean, I'm just thinking about the PEF money as something for the, I didn't think a lot of that money should be spent on teachers. Is this something that we can move these 21 teachers or specialists into help through these schools, and the PEF money can be used for other things within the school year? Is that something? I'm just wondering where the 21 teachers are going to go.
So through you, Chair. So you're right, this was an education option for about £1.2 million that would have seen 21 FTE posts, not necessarily people, but posts being deleted from the structure. No longer able to take that. So those, we learned yesterday from Cabinet that those posts and those roles are deployed across various settings. A fair chunk, Councillor Stewart, are in the ASN sector, recognising the real issues that are taking place in that area. And that Linda explained that at Cabinet yesterday. In terms of, you know, I'm sitting here with a colleague who's got a £2.5 million overspend in education, but with a 1.5 underspend in PEF. You know, and you know, I would love to be able to take that £1.5 million and add it to the 2.4. I can't do that because it is under the gift of the head teacher. So I can't direct the head teacher to do certain things with that money. It's for them, in discussion with the management team and their parent council, to deploy the best options to reduce that gap. But what you did raise was a good point, because we know that from the government is likely, all the indications are rather, the government will deploy and produce a specific regulation that will require teacher numbers to be maintained at the September 22 census level. We know our number. I think it's 1,243. In devising that figure, the Scottish Government have added in our core teachers, our teachers who were employed through the Scottish Attainment Challenge Fund, which is no longer a specific funding pot for this council. And concerning, they've also added in the PEF teachers. Now, we know that if the number was to fall, if the number of teachers was to fall, then there may be a financial sanction. So I'm meeting the head of education because we may need to we may need to direct head teachers who have employed a PEF teacher, because based on the reading, and I urge caution here because the regulation has not been published yet. We'll know when we see the regulation, but it may be the case that we will not be able to allow the head teacher to remove that PEF funded teacher post if it would have a consequential financial impact on the core budget of the council as we go forward. It's a dynamic situation. You know, there's issues taking place in Edinburgh that's causing things that we would expect to come out to have been delayed, but we're waiting to see what that regulation looks like. The latest we have is that there will be a regulation, and we're really it's important we see that regulation as soon as we can.
So it's just, you know, just to completely underline that, it was 21 posts and not teachers, Elaine, so it wasn't the people. And no, it's fine. And really just on what the regulation is, I mean, it makes it then really complex for head teachers who have then employed teachers using the PEF funding for us. And therefore, you know, I'd be hoping that we could then engage with the head teachers, you know, and have that authority to do that in terms of if it's going to affect our core budget going forward, because we cannot afford that. We cannot afford that. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Lily. That was a good exchange between Councillor Stewart and Joe there. I just wanted to just from information that came out of that exchange that I didn't know. Really pleased to hear that the FTE or the bulk of that 21 FTE that are involved in additional support needs, that we're able to save those posts, because we all know that additional support needs, there's no in excess of teachers in that area, I don't think, from having visited certain schools, etc. So brilliant that we were able to save those posts. But also in the, in the ordinary schools, and I know my son's a secondary school teacher, he works in North Ayrshire, so there's no no conflict of interest here. But he did actually attend an interview recently, and he was admitted to East Ayrshire's supply bank. He was put on the supply bank, but he's sorted. He's working away in North Ayrshire. But I know that, for instance, St Joseph's Academy were advertising for a PE supply. So just from that personal experience, there must be FT surplus in certain places, but there's also schools still looking for supply teachers. So all I'm trying to say is we can't have too many teachers that are not required if, as a council, we're still advertising for supply. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think that would be, the supply teachers would be to cover for sickness. However, I'll get officers to confirm that, Dale.
So I think you're right. We've been locked at a certain FTE figure, so it's not ratio anymore, it's FTE. But in the medium-term financial strategy and outlining our demographic through to 2028, we know that our 0 to 15-year-olds will fall by 8%. So there's maybe not much of a flexibility today, but going forward, and where, as you would imagine, Ian and his team are working on where that 8% is likely to be, because it will not be a standard 8% across East Ayrshire. There's places here that are growing exponentially and others that are not. So it's important we have that data. But the role will fall by, they reckon, 8% by a few years' time. The issue we have is that we are trying to impress on government that, as the role falls, then it would be logical to assume that teacher numbers would also fall. At the moment, we await the regulations, see if that would be permitted. At the moment, I don't think it is permitted, but we just need to be aware of that too as we go forward. And in terms of supply, it's a moving feast. There's 1,240 odd teachers. They'll be in mat leave, they'll be in sickness absence, no pay, retiring, so there'll be that ebbing and flowing as we go through. What's important for us now, and again, I go back to the regulation once we see it, we are told now that in the past, the key moment for the council was the September census in schools. That number of teachers, number of young people then became the ratio. That's gone now. We've got an FTE, and it isn't a fixed FTE. It's an FTE that will be reported back to government at specific intervals throughout the year, probably 3 or 4 times a year. And it's it's important. They've told us you're locked at that figure. So where it falls, we'll need to justify that. And again, it's something we're keeping a close eye on, because what we can't afford at all. And you saw as part of the budget report the potential financial sanction. We just can't take that. So it's a different position now in terms of this place going forward. And as you would expect, because it's our largest service with a budget of £130 million, we need to find a way of making it work, both for the young people on an academic setting and for you as elected members in terms of your responsibility for probity and for financial management, that we can do that as we go forward too. So that's where we are.
Amanda, do you want to come in just for?
Thanks, Chair. Just to give another wee bit of reassurance to members, we do an annual staffing exercise in the schools every year. Obviously being annual staffing, which we're in the process of doing just now, which is based on the role projections in secondary schools. It's also based on the subjects it's picked for the young people, so that we make sure that we've got the right teachers in the right place. So there's the ratios, as you would imagine, in the back of that. So all that calculations going on and that work then goes on. If we'd identify there's a surplus teacher, we've got processes and procedures in place, we would deploy them to another school. So that work's always going on an annual basis. The supply, as Joe and Councillor Jones has said, is mainly to cover short-term sickness. If it was for longer term, then they would be brought on in a contract. But given the profile of our teaching staff, we do have significant numbers of maternity leave there as well. So there's constant changes, but we do an annual staffing exercise to make sure the staff are in the right place.
Okay, Councillor Cogley.
Thank you. My questions actually relate to the capital budget, so I'm happy just to leave that for the moment if we're still talking about education. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ali. Just carry on, Joe.
Thank you, members. We move on to alternative delivery model, start at page 33. And as you're aware, this provides financial details on the Ayrshire Roads Alliance and East Ayrshire Leisure Trust. In respect of the Roads Alliance, we can see that the strategic delivery element has an underspend around £700,000. It's been like that all year, as Kevin has held posts back as part of the wider strategy for that service. We're seeing additional income. It's been reported through previous East Ayrshire Performance Report 2. Within the local delivery element of East Ayrshire, we've got a slight overspend of £65,000 due to a shortfall in parking income, but that parking income is after taking account of the money that Cabinet injected at the start of the year to support that budget. But also we're seeing, as I said earlier, that improving picture. And a loss of capital due to delays in programme in supply chain issues and price increases. Within the South Ayrshire local delivery, it's a £300,000 overspend. Higher costs in supplies and services, third-party payments, and vehicle maintenance charges. The table that's just at the bottom of that page shows the capital works, for example, in terms of the new Cumnock flood scheme, and the works around the bus station and resurfacing that's taken place since the start of the year. And in terms of the Leisure Trust, we're seeing a trust that's likely to end the year £160,000 underspent. We see a range of overs and unders across the elements of the trust. And what we do see is the management and their team's attempts to minimise the financial pressures within the trust, taking account of the challenges that are taking place within sports development. And what we see here is a really incredible picture of a trust that is almost fighting back against the pressures and the legacy of COVID. And in doing so, at the same time as breaking even and underspending, trying to redesign for a post-COVID life in terms of an offer for leisure and for gyms. And with your approval, Chair, just moving on to Treasury at page 37. As you know, members, it notes the members' debt portfolio, our totals and total investments. I'm very aware that there was far more detail provided to members a few weeks ago as part of the Treasury strategy that was presented to Council on the back of the budget. I would say that, you know, we're sitting here with investments of £5 million. It goes back to that under borrowed position we spoke about as part of the budget. As members are likely aware, we're very likely to see an interest rates rise at lunchtime today on the back of what happened earlier in the US. So I'm happy to stop there before moving on to business briefings, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Joe? No. Okay, Joe.
Sound. Your educated opinion, Joe, what we're looking at, a 1/4% rise?
I think I think it'll be a guarded 0.25% rise. I would say. I think I think there's an acceptance that the pace of the rises and the scale of the rises is now beginning to unearth some other issues. So I think it'll be a quarter, and with reassurance, I would imagine.
And just another question to Joe. Has he ever seen an economic situation like this where an economy's got no growth, runaway inflation, interest rate rises? Joe, if you were doing in Westminster and in charge, what would you do?
Right. So my job is here, as you know. So there's I think the medium-term financial strategy set it out. We had 2008, and we saw unimaginable things happening with banks and the like. I don't think we're there. You know, we're seeing in the October reports, you know, inflation to fall, but inflation we thought had peaked hasn't peaked. So we're seeing quite a dynamic situation, and the usual levers that would be used to control inflation aren't necessarily working because the inflation themselves isn't or wasn't at that point caused by supply. It was caused by energy, and I don't think that's going to be settled anytime soon.
No, great answer. And again, I agree with him 100%. To increase interest rates, put folks' mortgages up, take money out of people's pockets when inflation isn't actually consumer spending driven, it doesn't make any sense. So, aye, we'll have a chat about it, Joe, and see what we would do later.
Okay, thanks very much. We'll bring in Simon for the capital programme.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. If I could start just by going back to the capital section in the covering report, that's paragraph 16 to 23 at page 18. So that's setting out and providing some information on construction contracts that are projected to exceed their accepted tender values beyond 10%, and that's the trigger that requires us to come back and formally report that to Cabinet. So the details are set out around about those additional costs and are provided in the report. I'm happy to provide further information on those if it would be helpful, but I won't go into the detail just now. So turning to the main report, the coloured report, and just to note that the capital programme is continuing to make steady progress. However, as I've said before, and as you're aware, it's facing significant challenges due to the current economic climate. Again, as usual, I'll not go through the report in great detail. I'll just at the moment provide an update on a selection of projects in relation to their stage of development. So projects that have recently been completed include the new build Netherford Primary School. That was handed over on the 13th of January and pupils returned on the 20th of February. Work's also been completed at the early years facilities at Catrin and in Dalmellington. And with the SHIP programme, phases of development have now been handed over at Witch Road and Bellevue Gardens in Kilmarnock, with both these projects nearing final completion. There are approximately £27 million of construction contracts currently on site. That includes the new build Dunlop Early Childhood Centre, which is progressing well with the substructure nearing completion. The final phase of works at Kilmarnock Bus Station, which recently commenced. And again, with the SHIP programme, the development at Kilmarnock Road, Mauchline, which is also progressing well on site. Projects at a detailed design stage include St Sophia's Enerfit refurbishment, where preparation of the tender documents is well advanced following changes to the procurement approach. Student Academy Extension, where detailed designs are now being progressed, and the Galston Office project, where tenders are due to be issued towards the end of next week. Projects at the earlier stages of development include Doon Valley Community Campus, where work's ongoing with the design team through RIBA Stage 3 to refine the design proposals and prepare the planning application. And following the recent announcement of a successful Levelling Up Fund bid, the Cultural Kilmarnock project has recommenced, with design team and stakeholder meetings now having taken place. We're also progressing projects linked to the Ayrshire Growth Deal, including Moorfield Phase 3, where conclusion of purchase of the preferred sites being progressed, And with the Ayrshire Manufacturing Investment Corridor, designs are currently being developed in conjunction with external consultants. So thanks, Chair. That's just a brief summary, but happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Sally, did you have a question for Simon?
Yes, please. Yes, and I'm sure Simon's anticipating both of these. Just in relation to St Sophia's and the Galston office. As far as the Galston office is concerned, Simon, I believe the tenders are due to be issued by next Friday. And you've intimated, as has Joe, that that will be done. I would like to seek a reassurance that the tenders will be out. And as far as St Sophia's is concerned, I'm slightly unclear as to what the change is there. I'm detecting there's a slight delay. I wonder if you could just give us a bit more information about that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks through you, Chair. Just picking up on the Galston project first. Yeah, we have commenced the tender process. We have issued pre-qualification questionnaires to the marketplace and now assessed those, and we have a short list of contractors. There was a good response from the market, so we now have a short list of contractors that the actual tender will go out to. That's being finalised just now, and it's scheduled to be issued, as you noted, by the end of next week. So next Friday is our deadline. So hopefully there's nothing will change that, but that's the plan, to get the tenders issued to the market next Friday. With St Sophia's, I've probably picked up in the background detail at previous meetings, but we changed the procurement approach to the project, which was originally through what's called a pre-construction services agreement with a contractor to try and reach a negotiated contract value that would allow that project to go forward. But the market returns from some of that costing exercise was just not looking favourable. So we agreed with all stakeholders that we would revert to an open tender to give the project the best chance of getting the best cost in the marketplace. And that's what we're doing now. So we're working on those tender documents to get those issued to the marketplace. And our target is to commence the project over the summer. We've still to define the actual construction start date, but that's the background to it, Councillor Cogley.
Thank you very much. If I could just reply to that. Thank you in relation to Galston. As far as St Sophia's is concerned, then, are we looking at the school decanting as planned for the academic year 23-24? And I think it's just a couple of weeks just in addition to that.
Yes, that's the current expectation. I'll need to just check exactly where we are with the timescales to get those tenders out and when the award of contract would be. But that's what we're moving towards. That's what we're targeting. Yes.
And just to add to that, Simon, is the parent council group, are they fully informed of all of this?
Again, through you, Chair. Yes, the parent council have been kept fully informed. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Yep. Councillor Kyle.
Just want to know if there is actually a completion date for Glacier Street in Cumnock, because I'm continually being asked about it.
Yeah, thanks. Through you, Chair. Yeah, the project, as noted in the covering report, has required some additional works to be done. It wasn't unexpected with some of the kind of structural and rot repairs that had to be done, and that's unfortunately added a bit of time to the project. So at the moment, the completion date is scheduled for the end of May. I know it's still a little bit away, but we're pushing hard to get that finished as quickly as possible, and obviously get the shoring down and get the road opened. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Simon. It's really good to see Witch Road and Bellevue Gardens coming to completion and handover. Well, I know there's some properties handed over already in Witch Road, but it's really good to see that coming to an end now, and that will benefit lots of people. So that's fantastic. The bus station project, no issues. I know historically there's been many issues with the contracts, but all running smoothly and to time.
Yeah, to my knowledge, Chair, I've not been alerted to any issues. That final phase of works commenced in January and is moving forward. I've not been advised of anything problematic.
That's great. And just finally, just a comment really. If ever there was an area where they needed a new campus, it's Doon Valley. I was down there last week and transported back to the 70s. So sooner rather than later. So definitely throw support and weight behind that project to get off the ground as quickly as possible. Okay, any other questions, comments, folks? No. So we'll move on to the people section. It's Amanda.
Thanks, Chair. People section starts on page 44 with the absence statistics. The first table showing that there's been an increase in the workdays lost per employee to 10.58, which is an increase of 1.52 for the same period last year. The bottom two tables on that page show the breakdown of absence in terms of our policy and how we record it, with 8 days to a month and over 6 months reducing for the same period last year, but the other 4 categories increasing. We, as members will know, took our support and attendance at work policy to Cabinet recently with an update, and as in the back of that there's a suite of toolkits for support being established for managers. We're very conscious that we brought this policy in and then we hit COVID very quickly, so the number of toolbox talks and support mechanisms wasn't there at the beginning. Over the page, in page 45, shows the absence monitoring at the top of the page. Just pulling down to the welfare, the physio appointments are down in that of last year, but you'll see a significant increase on the counselling appointments. That's linked with both the absence being high, but also that we have now rolled out fully the app for counselling. So it's available to employees 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So there's much easier access to that, and the uptake has increased. Over the page, on page 46, I would just note that the disciplinary is still under outcomes still under consideration have all been closed off now. And then the bottom half of that page starts with workforce planning key performance indicators, noting that the head count has increased for January to December by 156. The following table is the full-time equivalent of those figures, and then you will also see an increase in our under 25s linked with the work that we're doing, in particular with the jobs and training. Vacancies are detailed at the bottom of the page. We are still experiencing some difficulty in some areas of being able to attract, but that's not unique to ourselves. But my team is working with heads of service and managers to look at more unique ways of advertising, but also we're doing a lot of grow your own and bringing folk on in the apprenticeship stage, so that will bring folk through. On page 48, you've got the number of new starts to the council, the number of leavers, and then we've got our payroll activity, which just details the processes that go through there, and then on to communications and organisational development, just a few stats there for members, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Amanda. It's good to see our young workforce is increasing, and great initiatives bringing them on for work training programmes, apprenticeships, and to grow our own. So these are all to be supported and applauded. So thanks very much. Are there any other questions or comments, Councillor Cannon? And then Councillor Cogley. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cannon. All right.
Just in apprenticeships, I think maybe I'm guilty of this as well, and something you hear from constituents, but retirements of experienced staff is not a great thing. But certainly my experience with the apprentices that I've come into interaction with so far, I think that's more than made up sometimes by the energy, innovative ideas. That's not criticism of the retiring staff, but I just think there's a real balance here, and I think it is a good thing. Very positive, having seen some of the apprentices that we're employing so far.
Thank you. Councillor Cogley.
Yes, thank you. Thanks very much, Amanda. Just 2 questions, one in relation to absence and one in relation to recruitment. 60,000 days of absence, or nearly 60,000 days of absence, seems to be extraordinarily high. And I seem to recollect we were looking at this about a year ago, and I can't remember exactly what the figure was, but I remember it being quite high. And I think that you had recruited or placed a member of staff to specifically look at this issue. And I wonder if you've come up with any solutions. And then secondly, in relation to recruitment, we faced a major problem with the recruitment of seasonal staff this year, this time last year, which had a big impact on service provision by outdoor amenities. Has that been addressed? And I'm hoping that we won't be facing that same issue this year. Thanks very much, Amanda.
Thanks, through you, Chair. So talking of the absence first, yes, you're right, Councillor Cogley, we did bring in a temporary HR officer and they've done a significant amount of work working across the services, working with our trade union colleagues, which has brought the revisions to the support and attendance policy that I mentioned earlier. We've not brought in any earth-shattering changes to the policy. It's more about how we streamline that policy and have more guidelines and toolkits for managers to work their way through, supporting them in that mechanism. The absence figures, you're right, I've never seen them as high. We're not alone, which is very little comfort. But coming out the pandemic, I think for such a long time, and the absence figures to a certain extent were masked because COVID was not part of the absence figures. It was special leave, but now they're treated as normal sickness absence, and where we're seeing spikes, and we've got the first winter that everybody's out and about, so we're seeing higher colds and flus, etc. as well. On the positive, what we are starting to see is the long term, the over 6 months, where they had been increasing significantly because they weren't getting any form of treatment, albeit there's still delays. Those numbers are starting to move now and decrease. So what we're trying to do is let the new policy bed in, supporting managers best we can, and we've kind of a constant review of that policy just to keep it under check. But right now we're just experiencing significant levels and it's just been unheard of, but we're doing everything we can to support the managers and support the employees. With regards to the recruitment, as you'll recall that for the seasonal workers, there was a number of issues there that led to them being delayed. However, we have created the 10 posts. They've all been recruited to and have been working in Ara with Kevin Braidwood's teams over the winter, and I'll move across to Nick Kelly's teams for the summer. There's 10 posts there in total. And with regards to the other seasonal posts that they think they'll require, there'll be specific adverts go out for them rather than relying on the bank, and they should be out very soon, but I can find out that exact date and give you that information.
Yes, thank you very much. Amanda, I think it might be useful for us to know, and I don't know whether this could be supplied separately, when we're looking at the number of workdays lost per employee, how does this compare with other local authorities? Because I just think it's useful information to have. Now, as far as the seasonal recruitment is concerned, I'm very concerned that we're only looking at putting adverts out now, because I think this is late. And certainly from the problems that we encountered this time last year and going into the spring summer season, I understood that we would be dealing with this sooner. So I'm raising a red flag of concern there. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. With regards to the absence statistics, absolutely we can share them. The benchmarking is only done annually and produced a year in arrears. So we're currently waiting for the last set of benchmarking, and as soon as I've got that in my to-do list to share with members. We'll do a short briefing on that. With regards to the seasonal recruitment and the timescales for that, I'll have to defer back to the service because obviously it's them that lead with the recruitment for their own services, and then get the details to you.
Yes, thank you. Though on that one, we did, because we did stress, or a number of elected members did stress concerns through yourselves, through HR. I think it was sort of early summer last year about the seasonal recruitment. So I would have expected HR to have had a bigger input in that to ensure that we don't slip behind as we did previously.
Thanks, Ali. Amanda, I've just got a question. See, in terms of our physio service support and our counselling support service, if our employees need time away from work to attend these appointments, is that permitted?
Yes, everybody gets paid time away from work to attend the appointments.
That's really good. And I mean, I think the supports that are put in place, the welfare of our employees is really quite good. But I'm still concerned, and I take Sally's point completely, that the 60,000 days lost is huge. But I don't think we'll be the only ones in that position. And you know what? COVID is still out there. COVID is still out there, and people are now thinking, well, if I don't go to work, I'm getting marked through as sick, I may lost pay, I'm not actually feeling that bad, I'm just going to go, and then the virus keeps continually going round and round and round in circles. So I think we have to factor that in along the way as well, Amanda.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, we do. It's obviously the COVID sickness absence is the first time we're starting to see that now in our statistics, whereas as I said earlier that it was recorded as special leave, and that's following the government guidelines. So now it is business as usual, for want of a better word. So it is classed as normal sickness absence, which was a condition that we didn't have previously. But I think again with people not being out and about in the same in the last year or so, and wearing masks, and then that all stops, that folk are getting more colds and flus and COVID, etc. So it has increased quite significantly, and I would anticipate, having been at the groups that I go to nationally, that I think everybody's experienced similar, but until we get the league tables, we'll not exactly know where that puts us. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Alan. It's just a question for Amanda. Amanda, again, I'm all for apprenticeships. It was just a question around trades. So, of those apprentices, actual trades, so I'm talking about sparks, joiners, plasterers, etc., etc. Do we know? Lillian's laughing. I tell you what, I've got an emotional attachment to this question. I was raised, my father was in Kilmarnock and Loudon, DLD, Direct Labour Department, Spark. So that's why I'm asking this. Of those apprentices, what percentage are actually trades? And see, housing services, are we actually looking to grow the number of, through these apprentices, finishing their apprenticeship and becoming fully trained, etc. Are we looking to grow the numbers that we have in-house? Or are we looking to keep that level? Or are we actually, managing numbers down and employing more subbies? What's the position with regards? Are we looking to bring more tradespeople in-house? That's what I'm asking. Because I know that the old age argument that if you employ subcontractors, you don't have to pay pension costs, etc. But I do think, this is where my old dad comes in. You maybe get a wee bit more pride in the job if you're in-house. So that was just the question.
I don't have the specific breakdown here of jobs and training and who's in what post. We have got over 109 already in post across the council, with 10 in the recruitment process, and then another 55 waiting for next year. But I can get you what that's broken down to and to what services they're in. In addition to that, we've got 33 apprentices across the council. A significant number of them are in housing and communities. That is from the original commitment and no out of jobs and training. But I've got that breakdown. I just didn't bring it with me this morning. With regards to the bringing more work in-house, etc., that would obviously be a question I would need to put to Blair as the head of housing and communities. I can certainly pass that on to Blair.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Amanda? Councillor?
Just a quick one. Obviously, there's working from home, which I think particularly now when you've got COVID, and I had it recently, but more and more people are getting lower symptoms because of the vaccinations. So you might have a cough, you have to stay off 5 days. If it's 10 days if you're working in an environment with vulnerable people. Are we maximising the ability of our staff to work from home? Now, I'm not, obviously those with desk jobs, it's straightforward. But I think maybe more senior people in healthcare and stuff like that, they may be able to contribute to the council while they're off, even though they can't do their day job, which is actually in the office. Are we maximising the possibilities for them to work from home when they've just got a cough, for example, but they have to stay off because they've got the symptoms? It's not a quick answer for today, but I mean, I'm just wondering if we are maximising not just the people that are desk jobs, which are typically the ones that would be able to work from from home easily. So it's just really a question. I mean, I don't know whether it's possible, and you know, could we provide a space here which is sectioned off where they could come in on it, because you don't necessarily want to give them the equipment if it's only going to be once. But is there somewhere they could come in here which was isolated with a desk where they could actually do the paperwork for whatever? It's just are we maximising that opportunity? There may be other ideas out there, I'm sure. But because, as I say, particularly with the symptoms coming down, but you have to stay off if you've got a cough, which doesn't affect your ability to work because your symptoms are very low because of the vaccine, but you could still be productive for the council rather than just sitting at home, twiddling your thumbs because you have to stay off. So it's just a question.
You, Chair. I mean, to the point of sectioning a building or that, no, that's not something we've looked at, but I know the services individually where it's possible, and the individuals, obviously we have to go with them as to whether they're sick, as in they're feeling the symptoms that they don't feel well enough to work. But I know, for any example, within health and social care, where we've had community care officers, personal carers, then we would get them, they've all got their own mobile phone, etc. So we get them to do check visits through calls, etc. during the day. We also try and maximise where possible, say it was a refuse collector, etc. if they weren't up to date with their e-learning, and get them to get a device and do some of the learning, etc. as well. What you are tending to find right now, though, is that because testing isn't mandatory anymore and folk aren't paying for testing, it only tends to be the folk that's coming forward that are sick, and they're saying they're sick and they're not well enough to do the job, rather than I've tested positive for COVID, but I'm okay, but I know I can't come out and about. So that's what we're tending to find there.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Amanda? MD online? No, no. Okay, thanks very much, Amanda, for that report. Thank you. So we'll move to David Doran for the health and safety section.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, members. If I could just start by bringing your attention to top of page 52 in the summary report. You'll see there that non-reportable incidents to health and safety sections increased by 63 when compared to the same page last year, and the incidents reportable to HSE have also increased slightly, but just before. If I look at do a wee dive into the non-reportable incidents, that's just mainly attributable to increases in violence and aggression in both educational and non-educational settings, particularly in period 8 for educational and period 7 in non-educational. I think I've said this in many other meetings, Chair, but mainly these incidents are attributable to challenging dysregulated behaviours, mainly involving young people. But in terms of just trying to give some assurance, Chair, to committee today, the policy that we have in place is underpinned by a number of different interventions. So we do crisis de-escalation training for staff, and we've also got specialist interventions for challenging behaviours like team around the child meetings, just to mention a couple. So there are plenty of interventions in place, but it's just a very challenging backdrop, which not only this council faces, but other councils face as well. What I can also assure committee chair is that these incidents are discussed regularly every quarter with the chief executive at the chief executive strategy group with the trade unions. So we're in constant dialogue with our trade unions, not only about the incidents, but also about the measures that we put in place to try and reduce them. If I can move to page 20, paragraphs 30 to 33 of the covering report, Chair. That outlines the various positive health and safety and well-being indicators that we have in place, some of which have already been discussed. The suicide prevention work that Joe spoke about earlier, just to give you some statistics around that, we've currently trained 424 people in suicide prevention, and we're well on target to train 600 people by the end of the year. And if we put that into context, that would be 1 in 10 of all our staff who are trained in suicide first aid. But it's open to all, Chair. That's our key partners in police and fire, elected members, and our staff and our communities as well. We've got 4 courses, and there's some spaces available through the rest of the year terms of mental health first aid, we've trained 256 people. We've got 11 courses in the spaces in July and August. And again, that's open to all. Community defibrillators that Joe spoke about earlier as well, and people have spoke about. We've had about £70,000 worth of equipment in the last 11 months donated to us. And yesterday's delivery, Chair, was the 23rd that we've put out so far in our communities. That is backed up by training that we've been doing in CPR and defibrillator, supported by Scottish Fire and Rescue. And at this point, we've trained over 800 people in CPR. Just as a side in that, Chair, I've also been contacted by Scottish Government through Save a Life for Scotland, and I'll be doing a presentation within the next few weeks to the 32 local authorities just on what we've been doing here, which I think is fairly groundbreaking. So that concludes the report, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, David. I mean, that shines a light definitely on East Ayrshire, what our health and safety team here are doing. It is absolutely fantastic work. It's life-saving work. The training element of it is life-saving work, as well as being educational. So absolutely fantastic. So take our gratitude and thanks back to your team, David, for that achievement. And we only know that it will only grow more and more and more, and hopefully throughout the whole of Scotland. So well done for that achievement. Are there any comments or questions for David on his report? No? Yes, Councillor Cannon.
Well, can I just clarify a point I made a minute ago? And I wasn't for a minute suggesting we should be asking people that are sick to work. It was only that we should be facilitating people, and it comes from experience, because I was testing positive. I couldn't be here, but I was fine. And I would rather have been working. Obviously, I did work because I've got my laptop, but others might be in a position they want to contribute and can't. That was all. Sorry, just to clarify that.
That's fair. Thanks for that clarification. Okay, so David, thank you very much for your report. We'll move on to back to Joe. Business briefings.
Thank you. So the business briefing sections, page 55, contain a range of indicators that Head of Service wish to draw to your attention. Within the Chief Exec's office, we see indicators that are above target. Note that the average time taken to deal with household or planning applications is slightly below the target. And as members are aware, this is principally due to officers there dealing with legacy issues and legacy applications. Page 54 is page 56 rather, provides details on the achievements for curriculum for excellence levels for 2021-22 and highlights an extremely positive position with improvements in literacy and numeracy noted across all stages of primary 1, primary 4 and primary 7. And it shows the incredible work that's taken place within our schools to support our young people in the attainment levels that they're now achieving. Within communities and economy, a range of indicators again, noting that in terms of rent arrears, showing pressures being experienced by tenants around unpursuable debts, as well as the impact of universal credit on rent arrears. And it's worth noting that, and members will know this from the budget report, that the Head of Housing and Communities has allocated a balance of £500,000 to create a tenancy support fund to provide financial support to our tenants as we go through this year and beyond. If I can continue, Chair, if that's okay, in terms of complaints on page 70, we see a marked decrease in the number of our complaints at this point in time and in the year compared to previous years. And those complaints reported, the majority were closed with full responses given. The analysis provides details of complaints at stage and by area, and it also notes the time taken to deal with complaints, which were slightly up and taken a bit longer in terms of stage 1, although down in terms of stage 2. And as members are aware, and it's an important point to raise, that Ian and his team and services ourselves, you know, we take the learning from occasions and instances where we've maybe not delivered the way we should, and these are noted in terms of that report too. Our risks section start at page 73. Delighted to report today that there's been no new risks added or nor have any ratings being changed since the last report. In terms of the first few risks around our income levels and our grant funding levels, we've passed our budget, a budget that was proposed by the Leader of the Administration, seconded by the Leader of the Opposition. It was fairly rare, I have to say, to get that. A budget for the year ahead. I've said probably more than enough in terms of the regulation that we're looking to see in terms of teacher numbers, but we're aware of that too, in terms of the impact that could have on our funding levels. We know, and we'll speak about it shortly in terms of cost of living, the pressures being faced by our families and individuals. We can see it through council tax reduction, we can see it through Scottish Welfare Fund, and we can see it through rent arrears. And in terms of the income received by the council, you know, we've got a small amount of COVID money left over that we can support some services who are still experiencing the aftermath of COVID. But, you know, we've got service redesigns through and service plans approved at Cabinet yesterday and at the previous Cabinet, all of which are showing services trying to redesign and take account of the different financial environment through which they operate. So, Leader, I'm happy, Chair, I'm happy to stop there, and before moving on to cost of living with colleagues.
Thanks, Joe. Are there any comments or questions for Joe? Councillor Cogley?
Yes, thank you. Joe, if we could look at page 57. So this is the curriculum for excellence and the attainment gap. I'm just a bit concerned about this. We see, could you just go through this and tell us what this means? Reduction in the attainment gap. Are we improving here? Can you just tell us a bit about it, please? Thank you.
So this is the right from the national it's not testing, but national assessments that are undertaken by young people and children in P1, P4 and P7 using electronic means that is then fed up to government. And what it's showing here in terms of the outcomes, we're seeing it's maybe badly worded, it's we're seeing the gap reducing.
Right, okay.
From the 25, in the first one, from 25% to 16%. So it is good news, but the way it's been perhaps shown shows that you would see a reduction, but it's not. It's a reduction in that gap, not a reduction in terms of attainment.
So we're closing the gap.
We're closing. Right, that's great. Thank you very much. I think it's perhaps the use of wording or perhaps my misunderstanding of it. Thank you very much. No, I'm greatly reassured at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. Joe, just on the arrears, like rent arrears, and when people claim universal credit for rent and they go into arrears until they get their claim, that has a massive impact on housing, you know, the revenue count. So is it normally is it 5 or 6 weeks before these can be processed for universal credit? Was John there? Was John there?
Chair, with your approval, I think it is about that, but those lines, so you're right in what you raise in terms of that timing issue that the Housing and Communities Employer has to deal with. But through you and with your approval, maybe John Dalton gives us a better answer in terms of the precise details in terms of gaps in UC.
Absolutely. If John's there.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, I'm here. In terms of universal credit, I'm afraid I'm not aware of what the current figures are within housing as to the level of arrears and that's been costed. Obviously, this was always going to be an issue with universal credit, and that's why the universal credit support team were created, were to support people with their universal credit applications and the anticipation that people would pay their rent money. But I think it's certainly within the current cost of living crisis, where people are getting their benefits, their housing rent money paid through their benefits, then by all accounts they would certainly be in a position to use that money for other matters that they would see fit rather than paying their rent. I know that from our in-court advice team, which we have down at Kilmarnock Sheriff Court, the level of rent arrears cases that are coming towards them, the level of rent arrears has increased quite significantly over the past couple of years. It's now not uncommon for our in-court advice team to be dealing with rent arrears levels in the region of £3,000 to £4,000.
Thanks for that information, John. That's quite hard to swallow, isn't it? But we understand the reasons why, with all the different financial pressures out there just now, cost of living, energy bills, higher interest rates, higher inflation. Councillor Rich.
Oh, thanks again, Chair. Just a question to John. I think I'm right in saying this, John, because at one time I used to be involved in selling buy-to-let mortgages. A number of years ago, when people were on benefits, am I right in thinking that it was possible for the landlord, not just councils, private landlords, that the rent element of the benefits was paid directly to the landlord, but did the law of the land not change so that the benefit money must go to the tenant now? Is that not right? And I know, and when people do fall into arrears with the council, how quickly are we getting in touch to try and help them with their monthly budget, as it were, and to get back on track?
In terms of the benefits, Councillor, yes, you're right in saying that within universal credit, prior to universal credit coming into implementation, everybody who was on a means tested benefit, income support and the likes, and going back to the old legacy benefits, would have made an application to housing benefit, and housing benefit in most cases was made to the landlord, whether that was a private landlord or a social landlord. However, with universal credit, that money is now paid and the responsibility is with the individual to make those rent payments. However, there are circumstances where within the system where the claimant can ask for that money to be paid direct to the landlord. Normally that comes into play after a period of around about 8 weeks or so. If once they slip into arrears of that level, that's when an application generally can be made to the DWP to pay the rent direct to the landlord. Sorry, the second question, second point, can you just repeat that, please?
Could I just clarify that? See the request for the element of benefit that relates to rent to come straight to the landlord. Does that request have to be made by the claimant? Like East Ayrshire Council as a landlord cannot take the money. The claimant has to say to Universal Credit, can you please pay the element of my claim that relates to rent to the council? So it has to come from the tenant. Is that,
yes,
that right? Right.
Yes,
okay.
that's correct.
Right, okay. The second question was just like when somebody falls into arrears, so we know they're in trouble managing their finances, how quick are we to get in touch to try and help them with a monthly budget, basically a plan to get back on track?
Again, that's not really within my area, Councillor. Again, that would be neighbourhood services that would do that, but obviously the neighbourhood coaches are in contact with the tenants on a regular basis, and they would be monitoring those situations and making an approach at an earliest possible opportunity with the tenant to try and come to some sort of a arrangement to resolve the issue. What happens when the cases run on for quite a period of time, then as far as our in-court advice team is concerned, once the council send out notices to the tenants to highlight the potential for potential court action, that would come to our in-court advice team would get notification of that, and we would write to every single person who's on that list, advising them of the service and asking them, inviting them to get in touch if they require any additional supports. So that's done as soon as we get the list through from the notifications. But prior to that, the neighbourhood coaches will be in regular contact with the tenant to try and find a resolution.
John, can I just quickly clarify something with you? I was under the impression that universal credit claimants had the option to have their rent deducted at source, or they could pay when they received that monies. Is that not the case?
They can apply, but normally it is with the once they're in arrears for an 8-week period of time. So they generally have to slip into arrears, first of all for the DWP and that to be able to to sanction that they pay the money direct and that to the landlords.
Thanks very much for that clarification, John. Okay, so does anybody have any other questions or comments on this? Peter?
Thank you, Chair. It was just to John Dalton, and it was a compliment. On page 65, it's the number of referrals to the financial inclusion team. Yesterday, myself and Councillor James Adams, we attended Grange Academy Parent Council, and we met Julie McCall, who's doing some very good work there with the financial inclusion stuff. And I believe she's just new there. She's only in there a few months. She's doing great. She's making a difference for families, and I would urge you to continue with this great work that's happening. She's also looking to outreach and cast her net further, and I've suggested to her that Shortley's Food Larder might be a good place to visit, where she could perhaps meet more people and extend her help to them as well. So thank you, John, and well done with the financial inclusion stuff that's happening in the schools. I think it's brilliant.
And just in the back of your comments, Peter, the letter from the headmaster at the Grange stating that there's been over £30,000 of monies brought back to families through the work of Julie at the Grange. So that is absolutely fantastic. So well done. So take our thanks back to your team, John.
I most certainly will. Thank you very much.
Okay, folks, if there's no other questions or comments on this section, I propose a 10-minute recess before we head on to the cost of living section. Okay, is that all right?
Yep. Colin, IT, can we pause the record at the moment during the recess? Aye. Colin, you there?
17 minutes, 18 minutes.
Okay, folks, we're about to commence the meeting again. Are we recording? Yep, okay. Okay, so we're going to head on to the cost of living section within the report. I'm going to hand over to Joe.
Thank you, Chair. And so if I can just take your members to page 63 on the East Ayrshire Reforms Report. And this shows almost the compilation of the areas that you, our Cabinet, awarded the £3.1 million to fight cost of living to. And it's just an update. I'm very, very conscious that this was presented on 15th of February. The report was compiled before that date and issued for lodgement and the like. So the figures will have been superseded by this point. But in terms of the options that you as members approved, in number one, which was to expand the skills-based financial inclusion pathfinder, which was originally in Loudon Academy, and that's now in all of our academies. And as Councillor Mabin touched on, there's now outreach into associated primaries too. That's in here at a cost of £320,000. The spend to date showing 17. It's not 17 anymore. Those people are in place and getting recruited. This is for a year's duration, and we know from the evidence we're now seeing in the temporary funding that we're providing, that £320,000, it provides 8 financial inclusion officers. We are seeing recurring benefits now being paid into purses and pockets across East Ayrshire. And so there's a debate taking place maybe in a few months' time, and I know that the Head of Education is keen on this too, to try and find a way of making this last longer than a year. And so those discussions are taking place from an officer level at this point in time. Same thing with number 2, and we've got carers, £25,000 for carers, with some funding taking place against that. Number 6 is where we provided as part of the approval of the £100,000 Scottish Child Bridging Payment, which is the Scottish Child Bridging Payment is paid 4 times a year to families whose young people are in receipt of footwear and clothing grants. And Cabinet agreed to boost that amount of money by £100 using the electronic systems that we have in here. So the systems are all, the applications are all electronic. Just under 2,900 applications came in for that, and we spent slightly more than we had originally thought. We took our roll call of the number of young people on footwear and clothing. We kept that application process open for a bit longer. More people applied, which was the right thing to do, and just under 2,900 families who were given the £100 in addition to, I think it was the £230 plus the money that the Facilities and Property Management gave in respect of the holiday food programme. And in terms of the number 7, that is an additional £130 payment on top of the £100 for footwear and clothing, and on top of the Scottish Child Bridging Payment. And you can see there a far bigger reach in terms of those families, and 3,900 were awarded that. Some funding to CAB, £270,000 to support warm welcome places. That £100,000 has been reallocated from that 270, and so you see in that second last column the £100,000 coming out. It didn't leave, and it's important to note, it didn't leave cost of living. 50,000 was used to add to the £350,000 already given for number 10, where colleagues in housing and communities are giving grants to support community-based and local groups deal with response to the cost of living crisis, including setting up other warm welcome spaces. Another 50,000 for lemonade, and it's just going back to the 100,000 that was given out, and 92 of that spent quite quickly. And so another indication on top of Scottish Welfare Fund and top of rent arrears and top of council tax reduction, that there's a real demand for help, practical and technical help with fuel costs. And that was another 20,000 added into the number 12.2. In terms of the food programme, £204,000 provided from that, and anticipated that we could take 20,000 out of that to add into other columns, which has been done too. And some further spend in terms of financial inclusion, and that 500,000 at number 16, which was an important one, recognising that cost of living doesn't just hit individuals and families, it's also hitting our business community too. And so the energy audit voucher scheme that was there and presented and approved by Cabinet some months ago, and just that absolute assurance to try and help the business community. And number 17 too, another £100,000 added in for that too. So an attempt by Cabinet to hit as many individuals and groups with support as possible. So on the day at Cabinet, a great deal of discussion, as I said at the introduction to East Ayrshire Performance, was made at number 9. It's really heartening to see that there's an additional paper being produced, and the recommendation from Cabinet is for this committee to provide some challenge in respect of number 9, and for a report to go back to Cabinet in the name of the Deputy Chief Executive following the discussions and outcomes of the discussions that will take place today at this committee. So with your approval, I'm happy to stop there and take any questions in terms of the table prior to handing across to colleagues to take through the other report.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Does anybody have any comments, questions for Joe? Yep, Councillor Cannon.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just struggling to find the page again. Sorry. The business piece, £500,000, and there's only 45,000. Is that just a lag because of businesses getting audits done before they make the applications? And is there obviously we're now heading to one day of March. Is there an update on those figures for the business?
So I can get that update to you and get that around all committee members.
Sure. Okay. Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. Are there any other points, comments? Nope. Okay. So we'll hand across for item 8. No, item 5. Sorry, or 4A. Sorry. Item 4A, the warm welcome spaces, and it's a report by Annika. Thanks, Annika.
Thanks, Chair. As Joe said, this was an agreement on Cabinet from the 15th of February to provide a wee bit more information about the warm and welcoming spaces. So I'll just take you through the paper, and then Suzanne and I are both here to answer questions either from an East Ayrshire Leisure's point of view or from the wider community point of view, or indeed any other questions around the welcome and warm spaces. So just a bit of background to it, although I know you're all well versed in the background to this. The campaign for cost of living was launched in September 22. An officers group was established very quickly to form a coordinated approach to our response to cost of living, and 6 key priority themes were developed, and actions, as Joe's just gone through, were agreed based on those 6 priority themes. The oversight group was established to oversee the delivery of these key actions, and this oversight group is still meeting regularly to ensure that the delivery is in line with the agreed actions. As part of the campaign, there were spotlight sessions with members, community planning and trade unions, and the council approved, as Joe said, just over £3.1 million. And the spend to date is in the paper previously. I'm also delighted as the Chief Officer of East Ayrshire Leisure that we were also able to take a presentation to our board of trustees, where we also committed some of our own resources to cost of living. That included a review of our membership, which allowed us to freeze our memberships and actually introduce new memberships for over 6,000 members of staff, for East Ayrshire Leisure staff, council staff, ARA staff and Health and Social Care Partnership staff, just to make sure that our staff were supported as well. So I was pleased to be able to do that as part of this programme. In terms of the welcome spaces themselves, one of the first actions we did was to carry out an audit of all spaces, whether they're leisure trust spaces or community spaces across the whole of East Ayrshire. And a digital map was produced to make sure we were able to highlight as many communities as possible, or to service as many communities as possible. That continues to develop and new spaces keep on coming on board, and we will continue to maintain and keep that digital map up to date. So East Ayrshire Leisure manages over 30 venues on behalf of East Ayrshire Council. What I will say is they're all welcoming and warm, and what this particular investment was to do was to make sure they were more welcoming and people felt that they could come into our venues at any time. So if I take you to paragraph 8 of the report, it gives a wee bit more detail of the East Ayrshire Leisure spend in particular. As Joe said, £270,000 was allocated to this piece of work. 100,000 has been reallocated from it. The investment to the East Ayrshire Leisure Trust venues is just over £120,000. So from paragraph 8, I'll just go through what that is. The funding was to enhance our community facilities. We have community facilities across East Ayrshire, and we wanted to make sure that they were comfortable, they were welcoming, and that people felt safe when they were in them. So we invested in some new furniture and equipment, and that was what some of the money was spent on. We also are really committed, as we are across the council, but the Trust is committed to digital connectivity. So we had identified an estimated value of £33,000 to enhance and expand our Wi-Fi within our venues. The table at paragraph 9 actually outlines what the installation costs are for the venues that were identified as part of cost of living. £33,000 was estimated, and as you see, the costs there are actually going to be £57,000 with 3-year support costs, and that money will be found out with the cost of living allocations. Just as a bit of background information, digital connectivity is hugely important. This was highlighted throughout COVID and continues to be the case. In the period September to February, 5,641 people used our digital suites. We had nearly 2,000 people using our digital bus, and we had over 6,500 people logging into the public Wi-Fi within our venues. So digital connectivity is hugely important. Over and above these figures that I've put in the table, we have identified a further £77,000 that needs to be invested in the venues that we manage on behalf of the council to ensure that all of our venues are enabled and support digital connectivity for all communities. Another sum of the money that was allocated through £120,000 was for programming and equipment for programming. Over the last couple of years, we've been investing in equipment so that we can offer community cinema programmes, affordable community cinema programmes. We have the funding in place for Cumnock Town Hall, the Dick Institute and Dean Castle already to offer this. We also are in the process of submitting funding applications for Morton Hall so we can offer it in Irvine Valley. And so the fifth one we thought would be important would be Scrutiny Area Centre, and that would give us 5 spaces for community cinema. And it's the equipment for this venue that we have allocated to the cost of living money. At the same time, we applied to the Scottish Government to get an exemption to licensing, which then allows us to offer free community cinema. So we no longer have to charge for this. It covers our cost. The licence costs are covered for this. So that enables us then very shortly to introduce a community cinema programme, which will be free for the community to come and see up-to-date programmes. This £120,000 also allowed us to invest in a space in Morton Hall. There was one space in Morton Hall that wasn't very welcoming. It's got a lovely new library in there. It's had some refurbishment work done to the main hall, but there was a small courthouse, if you know Morton Hall at all, the old courthouse in there, that just wasn't fit for purpose at all. So we used some of the cost of living money to upgrade this space, and now that's an open, accessible space for all members of the community. So that's how the money allocated to East Ayrshire Leisure has been spent. There was also a further £100,000 awarded through the community grants that Environment Communities manage. And on top of that, there are an additional 20 warm spaces provided to the community that haven't actually received any funding at all, but are very important as part of the network. So our approach to this was to provide very quickly a network of spaces and a digital map and information to provide spaces that people were welcomed into, regardless of what their circumstances and background is. spaces that they could come into at various times of the day. So it's really important that the network provides information about days of the week, times of the week, and that they're complementary. For example, in Stewarton, there's about 5 different spaces, but they're open at different times of the day and different days of the week. So it's providing that comprehensive look across the area. The figures in the first few months to the cost of living spaces are averaging just over 1,000 visits a week. Our own venues are quite low in terms of the numbers to the cost of living spaces. What we're doing is we're recording people actually coming in and using the resource of the dedicated space. However, it is important to note, in my view, that the change in numbers in our venues. So table 29, paragraph 29 in the table that's included in that, I've tried to give an indication of the change that we've seen in our venues from when we introduced the warm spaces. So whilst the numbers that we're recording actually using the resource that we've put in or the space that we've put in, you'll see from the attendance change, and this is measured against the exact same period from 21-22, the actual attendance in our venues is significantly higher. Whilst I can't say that this is because of the investment we've made in this is a significant change in a period of time when a campaign was introduced. We will continue to monitor all of the warm spaces, not just the East Ayrshire leisure ones, and we'll continue to adapt and respond to community needs as and when they come in. So, for example, if it's deemed one space is no longer necessary, we'll quickly move that resource to another space, and we'll keep working with the communities to respond to that. I think that's a brief outline of the paper, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Annika. Does anybody have any questions or comments they want to raise with Annika on this paper? No, okay, so I am going to, okay, I'll get Councillor Stewart in just after. I've got some questions, if that's okay. Annika, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind about your commitment and your drive to serve the community of East Ayrshire. Absolutely, I've got no doubts whatsoever. I think the activities that you're running for free to support the cost of living crisis for families to come into your venues is absolutely first class. And I think your initiative to roll out the free cinema across East Ayrshire is hugely beneficial and will directly impact positively on everybody in East Ayrshire. And therefore, when I look at the table for the spend, I have got no concerns about that £11,000 capital cost for that project, absolutely none. There are some areas where I would like to just take you to and just ask you some questions, if that's okay. So, if we focus on paragraph 29, top of page 86, or page 86. So we have the table there. And we also have what the figures were, which were printed 2 months ago. So these are the updated versions in your report, is that right?
These are the figures to the end of February. I can get an update on that forward through as well.
Okay, that would be great. So, and I know what you said about you record the attendances to the venue rather than the areas within your venues. Is that the case?
Yeah, so that's what we've been doing for the last 10 years is we monitor attendance to our venues, and that's what this table demonstrates for that period.
That's fine. I understand that. I also know the percentage increase in footfall through your venues, and that's encouraging. I think that's probably more we're into the recovery post-pandemic. That could maybe be, that could be a contributory factor to the increase in the numbers of the footfall. But we'll never know until we can find a system where we can get the numbers of individuals supported through the cost of living initiatives rather than people who are coming into the centre for other purposes. Yeah, what, Kim?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, I mean, this table's just for information, but what I will say is we're not seeing this level of increase in venues where we've not targeted venues that we've not targeted for cost of living as put through the campaign.
Okay, so there are areas you did touch on. There are some low figures where cost of living initiatives in your venues. And when I look at those venues and I see the costs, the installation costs, to create those spaces against, you know, what the footfall to these areas had been, that's concerning. And we have the North West Area Centre, where in total it's been £10,245, and the numbers recorded at the welcoming space is 4. So that's concerning that money has been put out to create a space, and you know, and the uptake or the usage of the public is really quite low. So that's concerning for me. I'll let you come in just after I'm finished, if that's okay. All righty. So that's one area. The Boswell Centre, the library. We see that there has been an investment there, 9,471, and there's been one person recorded for there. So again, that's a concerning figure for me. So, and then again, the Cumnock Library as well, where we have 10. And I would take you to the investment for the Morton Hall, New Millens. I completely get where you're coming from, Annika. It's your drive and your ambition and you know, and your determination, your commitment to serve the people. I get that. But for me, I think if we didn't have spaces that were available for warm spaces, then for me, I don't know that spending cost of living monies on capital costs to create them was the best use of that money. And I know that wasn't your decision. That was the strategic group. I know that. So you may not be able to answer that, but I'm voicing my concern in that respect. So did you want to come in terms of the North West Area Centre? And
I can do, but I think Councillor Richardson wanted to come in first.
Right.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Lillian. Thanks, Annika. It's just the layout of the North West Area Centre. So when you go into the building, you turn left, and the first thing you come to is quite a nice wee cafe. Maybe about 8 chairs where you can sit in 8 desks, sorry, with about 4 chairs at each desk, something like that, maybe not as big as that. So basically you can have a cup of coffee and a rolling sausage or whatever there. The actual room for the, because I'm noticing that the actual total footfall number of people using the venue compared to all the different venues at 5988, the North West Centre looks quite high. The actual warm place area is actually just, you can leave the cafe through another door to the left-hand side, and you're in the room that we set up. Now, basically, this room, I believe, was previously used as a sort of job centre. It had loads of old, it wasn't a job centre, but a kind of where we were trying to help people from the Northwest find work. It was loads of old computer equipment in it that had to be taken away and everything. It was given a lick of paint. All I'm saying is that it might be how it's been recorded. Because basically, there might have been people who went into the cafe, had a wee cup of coffee, had a rolling sausage. They might have stepped through into the area that we set up, but I don't know whether they've been recorded, if you know what I mean. Or they might have actually went to the Northwest Centre because the warm place had been advertised, noticed that they actually arrived, found that it had a wee cafe, and just decided to stay in the cafe. So, you know, but at the same time, when they arrived at the Northwest Centre and stayed in the cafe for their wee cup of tea and their rolling sausage, we got them out of their house, we got them meeting other people, they got a heat, But they actually might not have just made that wee step through the doorway into the area we set up. That's all I was going to say.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Richardson. Annika.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Richardson. Yeah, if I take that space in particular, you're absolutely right. That the room there, and we did this quite quickly to respond to a particular crisis that we were all facing at the time. And what we've realised is we've been monitoring them all the spaces throughout, and that space, people are not reaching. The venue's getting busier, but people are not reaching that space. So one of the things we need to do as part of this review is to actually move that furniture out of there and to create that welcome space somewhere else, whether that's in the building or another community facility, somewhere in North West Kilmarnock, then that doesn't matter. It's we can move that, that's flexible enough to move that. If I take the Boswell Centre, one of the pieces of feedback we've taken and we will be looking at quite closely is how we're recording these numbers, not just our attendance through the door, but how we're recording people using the welcome spaces. The Boswell Centre, when I looked at these figures myself, you see jump straight out the page at you, 498% increase in attendance and only one person using the space. Straight away, you're going, what's going on in there? So we moved the couch, and those numbers are now increasing. So it's the way my staff are actually reporting the use of the welcome space as opposed to who's coming in the venue. So it's trying to react quite quickly and respond to how the community are using not just these spaces, but all of the spaces, so that is monitored over the coming months. We've heard this morning about this isn't over, this is going to get worse, costs are going through the roof. So we need to continue to monitor these, move them, be flexible, respond to the community need, and make sure that the investment, which I believe is an investment, a one-off investment for improving community venues for a sustainable period of time, but it needs to respond to changes in the communities. So if we need to move the furniture and create different spaces, then that's what we need to do.
Thanks for that, Annika. Then Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Hogg.
Morning. Hi, Annika. I hear what Councillor Richardson's saying there. He's saying about people going into the cafe area and then probably missing the other area. So why could we know in that space utilise the space that's there, the cafe space, and reduce costs for people, like reduce the cup of tea, reduce the wee piece and sausage that they're coming in for? Is that doable rather than trying to direct them into a room that might cause a bit of stigma for them as the room where you go when you can't afford to heat your house? I'm just thinking maybe a bit more roundabout use that space, because if they're using it, then why not just give them cut price teas and coffees and rolls and sausage and just do away with the other room? My other thing was obviously the community cinema, which would be a great venue for the Doon Valley area, because it's a fortune to get to here to a cinema and it's expensive to take your kids. So would that be getting rolled out into the whole of the Doon Valley, i.e. Drungan, Ringason, Patna, Dunmelliton, just so we could benefit for that?
Through you, Chair. In terms of the space in the North West Area Centre, absolutely it can be moved, and Suzanne and I will work with the joint partners in that venue to see how we can support that wee cafe. Clearly it's being used, and that's something then that we need to factor in. In terms of the community cinema, I would like to be offering community cinemas in every town throughout the place. We can certainly apply to the Scottish Government for more exemptions. Happy to do that, but only where we can work with community groups as well as providing venues, because some of the venues in the Doon Valley that are managed by the community are better than our venues. So I think that would be a partnership approach to roll it out throughout East Ayrshire.
Just to come back in there, Chair. So right now we're actually not looking at the Doon Valley. Are we just looking at the ones that you've already spoke about? So Doon Valley is actually no one going to be a venue. You're going to have to look for extra funds for that.
Yeah, we need to try, and the equipment costs £11,000, so we'll be looking at funding for rolling it out even further once we've set up the initial 5.
So just to come back in again, Chair, can I maybe get where all the venues are? Because obviously we are one of the most rural areas, and I would like to see that implemented in to our areas, because to get to a cinema for Dunmelliton is a £6.50 bus fare for a parent and X amount of money to get into it. Whereas in other areas you've got it's more accessible. So I mean, can I see where they're all where they're all going to be situated? Because I'd really like this to happen in our area.
Through you, Chair. The closest one to the Doon Valley at the moment is Cumnock Town Hall. But I'm happy for you and I to work offline and see if we can get one maybe into Dunmelton Community Centre or to Drungan Community Centre.
Yeah, that would be great, because the buses to coming up from Dunmelton are few and far between. So it would be great if we could get even them situated in one venue one month or whatever, every 3 months. I don't know, but I'm quite happy to sit down and talk about it with Yannicka. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Hogg, you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. It's more of a comment rather than a question. At the outset, I think the spaces were set up with no targets for attendance. So now I see these spaces really being an asset going forward, especially as we've got the digital infrastructure which community groups and people can use. And also we now have more flexibility, and with Annica's team continuing to monitoring it, I can only see going forward that what's been implemented is going to be a great asset across our council. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hogg. Yeah, I think the spaces were set up originally with no targets of attendances. However, we have to, ensure that what we spend is best value, and therefore that's why it's in front of committee today. At the end of the day, there's £122,000 been spent, and we just have to be assured that that money has been spent with best value in mind. You want to come back in? Sorry, I see your hand raised.
No, I'm struggling to get it back down actually. But in relation to that, I understand what you're saying, and yes, it has come forward. But I think going forward, as I've just said, the flexibility and more spaces now set against a backdrop of uncertainty, I think we've come out of this particularly well.
Yeah. I mean, yes, you're right. But as we move forward, it's different needs that people are going to need. We're moving out of the colder months into the warmer months. So do we need warm spaces? Can we quickly flip those into other areas where it's going to benefit our families? And because I already explained that the free activities and the free cinema rollout, that will be a huge, that's a huge saving to families, especially with the school holidays at Easter and at summertime. There'll be more food provision required when the children are off school, where they would normally get their meals at school. So it's a changing picture as we move towards the summer and beyond. So it's really just to tease out what are the plans going forward, and just to ensure that the initial investment, we are maximising that initial investment, and we are getting best value, not only for the council, but for every single person that lives in East Ayrshire. Annika, Suzanne, I think you wanted to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it was just really to say that it was important to note that when we set up this initially, there was a significant mapping exercise that Annika referred to in the report undertaken to ensure, based on the feedback from members during Cabinet initially and then the subsequent elected member seminar, that we look to have at least as a minimum one welcoming space available in each of our communities to ensure that support was available for any community members that needed it at that time. And I suppose it's also important to recognise that the attendance figures shouldn't be the primary measurement for the support in these local areas. It's absolutely the support that is being given to the people that are accessing these spaces with less stigma attached to that. So they could be coming into these venues and accessing the spaces, but could be using the facilities in that venue for any other reason. It's about the support that's available to people from the financial information, the energy information, but also access to food, just from a social perspective, or even just to charge devices. And actually we've seen examples, and I think even David alluded to it in his report earlier under the health and safety, of suicide interventions have actually taken place in these spaces, which shows we're actually saving lives as a result of these spaces being available. and also colleagues on screen, the financial inclusion team and universal credit team, neighbourhood coaches are visiting these spaces as well and engaging with people in their own communities and giving them that information and access to support in the as a less stigmatised way as possible. So I do recognise about this value for money, but it is important to recognise as a result of these spaces being available in our communities, we're actually giving people access to information in as the most dignified way possible. We're saving lives and giving them somewhere to come out of their houses to. And I think as the campaign develops and matures, we're also looking at that campaign maturing. We're recognising, as you stated, Councillor Jones, we're moving out of the winter months into summer months. These spaces, albeit not from a warmth perspective, but these spaces are absolutely still required, because it's not just about having a heat, it's actually most importantly about coming out to a space where you can access information, socialise, and just be connected within your local community. So I just wanted to highlight that, and it's certainly something the Oversight Group will take on board and look at maturing the campaign and developing it further based on moving from winter to summer, but recognising these spaces are absolutely just as valuable during our summer months, because it's access to that information. And maybe that's something we need to look at, and dropping warm at the start of it and just calling them welcoming spaces so that they are available for people, and that we can continue to support that. Also important to recognise, in addition to the East Ayrshire Leisure Trust venues, our community organisations, building on what they did so very well during COVID, are doing excellent work in response to this crisis locally in their own spaces. And actually, what we're seeing is that these buildings and facilities are being used further, in addition to what they would normally have been, as a result of people just being able to come in and access food and other information that's available. And also important that actually I think it's approximately 20 of the spaces have received no support in terms of funding. They've not asked for it, they've just set up in their own accord, particularly through our faith communities as well, and doing some brilliant work. And we've had some real examples of people being supported and the difference that's making to individuals. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. I think we do have to take cognizance of the investment, because you said it yourself, this crisis is going to be here long term, but we only have £3.1 million to deal with it as a council. And in terms of COVID, that's £70 million less than we had to deal with COVID. And arguably this crisis will impact on families harder coming out of the COVID crisis into this cost of living crisis. So therefore, being able to stretch every penny for as long as possible throughout this crisis is a primary aim. And therefore, we should absolutely take cognizance of the investments that we make and ensure that it's absolutely best value that we are getting from this investment. It's not a criticism of people's drive and commitment to the communities, absolutely not, because we recognise that couldn't be further from the truth. But when I look at, some, and it may be the way the figures are being reported, but when I look down this list and I'm trying to think, obviously your leisure centres, we can flip them easily. Come the summer months, we can flip them. But I mean, North West Area Centre, where there's over a £10,000 investment there, we can't really flip that from a warm space to an activity space, can we? Or can we?
Yeah, we could do. There's opportunities to do that. It's a shared site, and I'd be working with our partners across that site to see what's most appropriate for that community. But there's no reason why we couldn't do that. As Councillor Richardson said earlier on, that it used to be set up as a digital space. It was defunct. But if that's what that community needs, maybe that's what we need to look at as the priority for that community. There's no reason why any of these spaces can't be flipped, for want of a better word, into whatever the community needs. And that's what's important about the oversight group, taking the feedback from elected members, from the community, so that we can respond appropriately to the needs of the community.
Thanks, Annika. Councillor Richardson, you want to come in?
No, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Annika. It's just because the North West Area Centre was mentioned there. And I think Lily and Annika both made good points. I think this is where these two things are going to merge in together. Like coming, the cost of living crisis and coming out of COVID. Because I think by advertising the warm spaces, I think what we've done, and there's a really good page 90, there's a wee box at the bottom, but some of the comments. I think what we've done is we've maybe generated more footfall through to our old community, let's just call them community centres, because that's what I think of them as. So we've maybe just generated more footfall, which is great, back to our community centres without the actual specific warm space being used. But people have, like coming out of COVID-19, people get so used to being in lockdown and no mixing, and especially the elderly staying in their own house and no meeting their friends. And if we've managed to get at least some of those people back at their house and going to a community centre and mixing and taking part in activities, the North, Lovely, have you ever been up at the nucleus? You ever been in the Northwest Centre?
I was here a week past on Saturday and got my breakfast.
Oh, okay, well, you'll have seen it.
I did pay for it, so I don't need to put it in my members' interest. I did pay for it.
Well, see if you've been in the building, that place has got huge potential. It's got at least 2 big massive halls. Now the big hall in the Northwest Centre, I've visited 2 or 3 times, and you go in and there's 2 wee tables of folk playing dominoes, which is great. But this hall is massive. You could have like 100 old folk mixing and doing activities in this hall, instead of maybe the 8 that were there when I visited. So my thing would be, and I know it would be a wee bit extra money, but let's give the folk something to do when they get there, like a couple of pool tables, a dartboard. Do you know what I mean? Because the place could be flipped in an instant into somewhere where the Algians want to go. Let's get them out of their houses back into the community centre so that they're mixing with their pals. And that's where I think coming out of COVID and the cost of living, the 2 things are going to come together.
Thanks, Councillor Richardson. Councillor Cannon, do you want to come in?
Yep, so not too much to add about what my colleagues already said, but I think we need to remember the context here, that we were trying to put something in place when we didn't know what Westminster was going to do because they were busy having elections. There was so much uncertainty here. We had to make decisions. I have no doubt. I think what we've done is fantastic, and as a member, I'm proud to be associated with it. I think there was uncertainty. It's being monitored. I think it's very important to have had this discussion today, absolutely, because it's public money. But I have no doubt in my mind that it's been well monitored. The money's been well spent. I would tend to disagree in terms of capital spend, particularly when it comes to digital, because as you've alluded to, it's long term. There's too much short term decisions made. I think it's a big problem we have socially. But investing, particularly in digital exclusion, is a huge problem, and that will get used in the summer, whenever. And really, just to say, I always think back to when Eddie was telling us about the constraints and things that were coming, and Joe as well, that we needed to get the best bang for our buck. And I think, honestly, we're getting a really good bang for our buck with this money. Thanks.
Yeah, so in terms of, I've got a question for yourself, Councillor Canning. So in terms of the £122,000 invested in across these venues, and then when you go to the next report and you see what's been invested in the communities, the volunteers, and what they're producing. I mean, and we'll go into the next report, but there's one that really sticks out for me, and it's Ochiltree Community Hub. We've given them £779, and they've supported 74 individuals for £779. So see, for me, that's gold. So I would love to speak with that group and see what's your model. How can we roll it out? So I mean, so when I know it's not apples and apples. I know that it's different. We're not comparing apples and apples, but it's important just to be assured that the investment is long term and that it's best value.
Absolutely, can agree. But I'm confident that the team over there, I'm sure Annika's having the same thoughts as you. But I think, we didn't know what the weather was going to be like over the winter. That's a huge impact in terms of footfall. So it's a moving target. It's very early in the process, and I just repeat again, I think we're getting good bang for our buck. Yeah, thanks.
And just, you make a good point there, the cold weather. I mean, we've had the coldest snap in a few years, just there in January, December, January time, when, you know, the warm spaces were just in their infancy. And I would have thought that maybe that would have, you know, encouraged people to come out, but clearly they didn't at that time. I take the point, it's still in its infancy, but I'm glad that we're going to be reviewing it, and I look forward to seeing the review report. But I just, you know, concerned about, you know, when I look at some of the low numbers, and I look forward to the next report with increased numbers, you know, that will give added reassurance that the investments are and was the right thing to do, and that it wasn't just a quick, you know, we need to get something done, let's do a map of where we can put them in, and actually not having any background information before we put something in there and spent money in there. And I know that we react quickly to help our communities, but I just think we have to just take a step back and then just see, right, you know, even putting in a pilot before we commit to huge amounts of funding. That's my personal view, but it is in no way any reflection of your desire, your commitment to both the East Ayrshire Leisure Trust and to the people at East Ayrshire, Annika. So please be assured about that. Absolutely, please be assured about that, and I'm sure everybody in this room shares that view. Is there anybody else get any comments, Peter?
Sorry, just looking at the table on page 94. It's some of this I like a lot, and other bits and pieces not so much. When we're in poverty and crisis, we're talking about the choice of eating or heating. The likes of item 9 and 10 with the CVO, they're providing food, emergency food supplies. Number 16, FEFA, foodstuffs and supplies. These are the kind of things I like. Guildfoot TRA at number 20, provide a breakfast club for New Mills Primary School. There's other ones, there's loads of different examples. The wee sub-table at the bottom, support for fuel, 6 grants, foodstuffs and supplies, 17 grants, and the grants for Welcome and Space, 23 grants. My own opinion, I would rather have seen that flip side slightly and had more grants going towards foodstuffs and supplies to help folk with the choice of eating or heating, rather than being spent on infrastructure and furniture. In the middle of winter and a fierce cold snap, try to persuade an old buddy to leave the house, the nice warm house that they've spent a fortune getting it nice and warm, to leave it and go out into the freezing cold in the dark to go to a warm welcoming space for a wee while, and then leave that warm welcoming space to go back into the cold and the dark to make their way home, isn't attractive. My mother's in Bonneton. She wouldn't go to Bonneton Community Centre for the bingo because it's cold and it's dark, and she's no leaving the house. She spent all day with the heating on in the house. Her house is nice and warm, and she's no leaving it to go out in the cold and the dark. I'm just wondering if we've made a mistake, if it was the wrong thing to target, and we should have had more gone towards the actual foodstuffs and the supplies and the food parcels and the breakfast clubs and the Galleon providing 1,000 free meals to children under 12. Brilliant. Stuff like that's brilliant. But I'm not so much new looking back with the wisdom of hindsight. Did we actually make a mistake trying to make warm spaces that folk weren't keen on going to? Also, some of the costs aren't, some of them aren't up and running yet. Item 2, AIBC, £5,000 for a warm welcome space. And you go to page 99, I think it's 99. Yeah, at Sauchion Indoor Bowling Club, and it's not started yet. So they get £5,000 to do a warm welcome space. and it's not started yet, and we're into March. So we've lost January, February, March, when it was cold and that warm work on space hasn't get started. There's other examples like Rankinson Community Association, not started yet. If you go back to 94, at 37 and 38, Rankinson CA, Rankinson Larder, £4,000 each, but they're not started yet. There's things that are like we haven't done due diligence, we haven't followed up where the money's went and why is it not started and what's been done. 24 Logan Day Centre, restart a community larder and some running costs. And you go down to 99. I can't find it now. Again, Logan Day Centre in Ward 7, it's not started yet. I don't know, that's just my opinion. I'm happy to take any feedback or comments for other people. Am I the only one that's thinking maybe we've done this slightly wrong? We should have actually been providing food and energy help direct to families, direct to schools, direct to breakfast clubs, food parcels, that kind of thing, rather than the warm spaces.
Thanks, Peter. I suppose for those grants that have been approved and sent that are not yet started, I mean, just how are the funding applications assessed, and based on what evidence and criteria are they then awarded, and how is that then followed up? Because a larder, you know, surely you'd expect that to be spent.
I can give assurances just on basis some of those queries that everyone that has been awarded funding is now operational. The one you specifically referred to in terms of the Auchinleck Indoor Bowling Club or reporting in terms of they weren't gathering the figures, that's why it's shown a 0. It's the capturing of the figures, but everybody that's been allocated funding is operational and have been in receipt of the funding. Rankinson Community Association in particular were awarded, or the Rankinson as a village has been a small area with particular needs and quite don't have access to shops, etc. They've got a couple of options. They run activities in the community centre, and if you were following them in social media at all, the attendance figures there in terms of families coming in to use the space for activities has been brilliant. But also one of the other grants that was offered there, they're actually doing parcels to actual individual households, and at the time in the height of the winter, giving duvets, etc. So I can give assurances from a Vibrant Communities perspective. Any of the funding that has been allocated out has been obviously monitored and followed up by the local community worker for those areas, visiting the groups, speaking to the groups that have been awarded funding and just getting updates. We are regularly visiting these spaces and places and groups that have been awarded the funding and offering any additional support via advice and guidance where required.
Thanks, Suzanne. I mean, the groups that Councillor Maben's highlighted on our papers in page 99 doesn't say 0. It says not started yet. That's what it says. It says not started yet. Logan Day Centre, £5,000 larder and running costs, not started yet. It says Rankinson Community Association, not started yet, £4,000 for energy costs.